I have worked compliance audits for the Keth-Soval Boundary Inspectorate for 11 rotations. I have logged 412 standard psychological pressure assessments. I have watched 17 species crack under the protocol, watched them pace, shout, bargain, weep, sign whatever the senior assessors put in front of them. The chamber works. It has always worked. I am writing this account because Senior Assessor Vethorin has asked for an incident log, and because I do not trust my own memory to hold the shape of what happened without warping it into something more comfortable. The human arrived on a standard freight broker transit permit, class 37 origin world, name listed as Daravos. The permit flagged 3 minor irregularities: cargo manifest filed under 2 different jurisdictional codes, a transit corridor variance request that cited a pressure routing formula nobody in our annex had seen before, and a deathworld classification that 2 of our senior assessors initially assumed was a clerical error. They assumed this because she was small. She had short brown hair, a logistics vest with a cracked left buckle, and the general appearance of someone who had been awake for a long time and had made a private peace with that fact. She carried a battered transit tablet and a thermal flask, and nothing else. The standard procedure is simple. We invite the flagged traveler into the compliance chamber for a routine reclassification review. The chamber is a white hexagonal room with 6 exits, 1 active, 5 sealed. Over the course of the assessment, we seal the active exit as well, progressively announcing each lock, watching for the behavioral indicators that tell us the subject is ready to negotiate. Most subjects begin negotiating by the 3rd seal. All subjects have negotiated by the 5th. The 6th seal has never been necessary. Dara Voss walked into the chamber and looked at the ceiling first, then the floor. Then she walked, unhurried, to each of the 6 walls in turn, touching nothing, looking at the seam where wall met floor, then the seam where wall met ceiling. I logged this as atypical orientation behavior and made a note to watch her response to the first announcement. Senior Assessor Vethorin opened the protocol. He announced in the formal cadence that exit corridor 1, the one she had entered through, was now sealed pending reclassification review. He explained that the chamber was a controlled environment designed to facilitate cooperative compliance. He used the word facilitate 4 times. He always uses it 4 times. It has a softening effect on most species. Dara Voss took out her transit tablet and began writing something down. She did not look up. Vethorin proceeded. Exit corridor 2, the ventilation adjacent northeast panel, sealed. He announced this with slightly more weight, the way you announce the second thing when you want the subject to begin connecting the dots. She wrote something else on her tablet. I noticed her handwriting was fast and angular, and she did not erase anything. By the 3rd seal, she had filled what looked like half a page. She had also, at some point I could not precisely identify in the monitoring log, moved to stand in the center of the room. Not pacing, standing. As if she had decided the center was the correct place to be and had no further opinions about it. I flagged this to Senior Assessor Vethorin through the internal channel. He told me to continue logging. The 4th seal engaged. Vethorin announced it and asked, with the practiced warmth of someone who has asked the same question 400 times, whether the subject would like to discuss the terms of a voluntary reclassification waiver. The waiver would simplify her transit status considerably. It would also reclassify her origin world's hazard rating downward, which would make future inspections faster and more comfortable for everyone involved. Dara Voss looked up from her tablet for the first time since the 1st seal. She looked at the monitoring panel, directly at it, which meant she was looking more or less at me, and then she looked back down and kept writing. The 5th seal engaged. In 412 assessments, the 5th seal has produced one of 2 responses: tears or signature. Sometimes both. Vethorin has a speech prepared for each. He began the tears version, which is longer and has a section about cooperation being in everyone's interest. She slid something across the floor. Not across the floor toward Vethorin's voice panel. Across the floor toward the sealed northeast corridor, the one nearest the ventilation shaft junction. She slid it with the flat of her boot, a careful controlled push, and it stopped precisely at the wall seam. It was a form. Vethorin went quiet. I watched him pick it up through the corridor camera. He held it for a long moment. It was a completed transit reclassification waiver. Not our form. Our form is Keth-Soval Standard KS, 7 series, pale blue, 6 sections. This one was pale gray and had a form number I did not recognize, DW 37-0028. The fields were filled in full. The jurisdictional routing was correct. I checked it against the Interbureau directory while Vethorn was still holding it, and it was correct. The address was correct. The processing bureau stamp line was correct. The signature line had her name printed in block letters, and below it the transit date, and below that a single notation I had to enlarge to read. Asterisk filed prior to entry. Copy forwarded to Sector Vethorith Transit Authority, Ref. KS 37 variance 0028 14 standard hours ago. Asterisk. The 6th seal had never been necessary. Vethorn asked through the voice panel, in a tone I had not heard him use in 11 rotations of working beside him, what this form was. Daravas capped her stylus. It's the variance resolution for the corridor routing irregularity you flagged on my permit, she said. Her voice was the same temperature it had been when she walked in. The formula I used is registered under the Keth-Soval Freight Transit Exception Protocol. It's been on the books for about 60 years. It just doesn't get cited much because the standard routing is easier for most carriers. The two jurisdictional codes are both valid. They overlap in Sector Vethorith because of a boundary renegotiation in the 3rd continuance cycle. That's documented in the Annex Cross-Reference, Appendix 4, if you want the page. She paused. The form I just sent you resolves all 3 flags. Your bureau director already has a copy. I expect the transit permit will clear within the hour. Vethorn said nothing. She picked up her thermal flask and drank from it. Is there a return corridor? She asked. Or should I use the maintenance shaft? I measured it when I came in. I fit. I did not know who unsealed exit corridor 1. I was still reading Appendix 4 of the Keth-Soval Freight Transit Exception Protocol, which I had not known existed, confirming that everything she had said was accurate. When a monitoring log showed the corridor light shift from red to green, she walked out the same way she had walked in. Unhurried, flask in one hand, transit tablet in the other, cracked buckle on the left side of her vest. She did not look at the monitoring panel again. The permit cleared in 40 minutes. I filed the incident log under standard review and spent the rest of that shift reading the exception protocol in full. There are 14 variance clauses in it that we have never once applied. I have made a note of each one. I have been a compliance auditor for 11 rotations. I have never once, before that morning, thought to ask what a Class 37 Deathworld freighter runs on. It runs on knowing which doors are already open.